way, boy!
The ancestors of the men who turned the tide of the American War of Independence at King's Mountain in October 1780 were the Anglo-Scottish borderers. The Reivers were clans or riding families which inhabited the borders between the warring kingdoms of England and Scotland. However, with the ascension of James I of England and VI of Scotland, the Reivers were basically stamped out. Many of them were forcibly transported to James's new colony in the north of Ireland, Ulster. But in time, the Scottish Presbyterians who settled there came under attack for their faith from the Anglican English. So many of them, around the 18th century, emigrated to the New World, to North America. There was a particularly high concentration of Scots-Irish settlers in the Appalachians. The Appalachians are a mountain range which spans right down the eastern seaboard of the US, or what would become the USA. Following Pontiac's rebellion, which was a native uprising in the Ohio River country, the British created the Indian Proclamation Line. All settlers, apart from licensed traders, were forbade to go beyond this line. However, the Scots-Irish, who never really fitted in to regular society, crossed the mountains and settled over the mountains, hence Overmountain Men. They actually created the Watauga Association years before American independence was declared in 1776, and they essentially declared themselves free from British rule. When the American War of Independence broke out with shots fired at Lexington and Concord in 1775, the Scots-Irish were mostly neutral. However, in May 1780, the Waxhaws Massacre appalled the deeply religious Scots-Irish. Their loyalty to the Patriots was secured when Major General Patrick Ferguson, who was a Scottish-born British general, a pioneer in light infantry tactics, sent them an ultimatum which said, if you do not surrender yourselves to the British, we will lay waste to your country with fire and sword, hang up your leaders, and all of that really unhelpful rhetoric. So this, needless to say, brought the Scots-Irish, the Overmountain Men, into the American War of Independence on the side of the American Patriots. A force of Overmountain Men set out over the mountains, this time heading east rather than west, as they had done years before to establish their first settlements in the Appalachians, and they encountered Ferguson's force on the border between the Carolinas, North and South Carolina, at a place called King's Mountain. The rocks, the trees, all proved excellent cover for the Overmountain Men, who were able to snipe at the British and the Loyalist militia up on top of the crest. Whenever the British launched bayonet charges downhill, the rebels would simply withdraw, hide behind rocks and trees to reload, and then when the British charge was spent and the formation had been disrupted by the trees and the rocks, the Patriots would resume their attack. Groups of them started scaling the hill. The Loyalists were caught in a horrendous crossfire. Some of them were trying to surrender, but Ferguson actually cut down the white flag which they were trying to raise, and the slaughter continued until one of the Patriot commanders actually just intervened and was knocking down the barrels of his men, crying, "Don't shoot, it's murder to kill them now," or something along those lines. In spite of this, several of the Tories, the Loyalists, were hanged or lynched by the rebels before discipline could truly be restored. Ferguson himself was shot dead during the battle. The Overmountain Men's victory at King's Mountain proved a turning point in the American Revolution, a massive rallying cry, a morale boost for the Patriot cause, which had not been doing very well in the Southern theatre in the year of 1780. To say the least, they had suffered disastrous defeats at the Battle of Camden, for example. The next year, in 1781, a Virginian frontiersman called Daniel Morgan led Continental Army soldiers, frontier riflemen and militia to victory against the British, who were led by Banastre Tarleton, who was the impetuous, rather ruthless British cavalry commander who perpetrated the Waxhaws Massacre. So now let's get into the clothing and equipment which the Overmountain Men would have had with them at the Battle of King's Mountain. You can see on my head I'm wearing a Scots bonnet. This was made of heavily felted wool, knitted and traditionally dyed blue with woad or indigo. So the blue bonnet is actually originally from northern England and the lowlands of Scotland. It was associated mostly with the peasantry, the working class. The Patriots at the Battle of Kings Mountain adorned their headwear with paper, a piece of paper, to distinguish themselves from the Loyalist militia, who looked very similar, apart from they would have a pine sprig in their hats instead. Not all of the Overmountain men would have been wearing Scots bonnets. A lot of them would have also been wearing brimmed felt hats and fur caps as well, possibly, although those weren't as common as Hollywood would make it seem on the frontier. Moving down, this is a hunting frock. You can see it's cut with the double caping on the shoulders in the design of a greatcoat from the era, and the hunting frock had to be closed at the waist with a sash. They were often very decorative and brightly coloured. Of course, the voyageurs in Canada would become most famous for their sashes, but they were also worn by American frontiersmen. Bread bag, water bottle, metal, wooden canteens were also quite common. Powder horn to reload the long rifle. On their legs, the Overmountain men would wear breeches and stockings. The breeches could be wool or linen, and the stockings were typically wool. Then, to cover their stockings, to keep them clean, and also to prevent anything getting into their shoes, they would wear these gaiters, which are made of canvas, buttoned down the side, and held up with a garter strap on each leg just underneath the knee. On their feet, the Overmountain men would have worn moccasins, deerskin shoes, or these buckle shoes. So that was the clothing and equipment of an Overmountain man at the Battle of Kings Mountain, and a bit of the history on the role the Scots-Irish played during the American War of Independence. Thank you for watching. Eat this! How do you like it?